Hey guys, today we are going to read and discuss Act 2, Scene 5. This scene takes place in Shylock's home immediately after Act 2, Scene 4. In Act 1, Scene 3, on page 43, Bassanio invited Shylock to dine with them. Shylock was appalled by the idea of dining with those who eat swine flesh. In this scene, however, Shylock decided to accept Bassanio's invitation. He does not believe he was asked out of love, but the feeling between Bassanio and Shylock is mutual, and Shylock will attend the banquet out of hatred. Shylock tells Jessica that he has been a generous master to Lancelot. He is happy to be rid of that rascal. In this scene, Shylock also seems worried and restless. He had a dream about money bags, and he is concerned about his wealth. Therefore, he tells Jessica to lock his home and guard the key, which is a form of dramatic irony, because Jessica has already revealed to us as the audience that she plans on stealing her father's gold and jewelry. Just before Lancelot departs, he delivers Lorenzo's message to Jessica. Jessica's plan to elope with Lorenzo will only be successful if Shylock leaves the house and attends the banquet. His indecisiveness about going to the dinner at Bassanio's house therefore creates tension. Let's begin our reading on page 69. In front of Shylock's house, Shylock and Lancelot enter. The setting is in front of Shylock's house, and the time immediately after the previous scene later that same afternoon. Shylock: well, you shall see. Your eyes shall be your judge. The difference of old Shylock and Bassanio, calling, Jessica! To Lancelot: you won't stuff yourself with food as you have done with me. Jessica! And sleep and snore and wear good clothes to rags. Where are you, Jessica? Shylock is having a conversation with Lancelot, and he begins by saying, well, you shall see, your eyes shall be your judge. In other words, you will now see with your own eyes. The difference between Shylock and Bassanio. Ironically, Shylock truly believes that he is a good master and a loving father as well. But we've already heard about Lancelot's complaints about Shylock. As Shylock walks into his house, he calls out Jessica's name. He is looking for her, but he is very impatient and doesn't want to wait for her. She needs to respond immediately. That says something about the strict discipline that he has in his household. Jessica doesn't have a say over what's going on in the house and how things should be done. Shylock makes all the decisions. Shylock says to Lancelot, you won't be able to stuff yourself with food, which means he won't be able to overeat himself, which was one of Lancelot's complaints. Shylock did not feed him well enough. You can decide for yourself who you want to believe, Shylock or Lancelot. He also says that he won't be able to wear his good clothes to rags, which means that he won't be able to wear his clothes out. At last he shouts again, where are you, Jessica? Which emphasizes his impatience. He summons her and she needs to respond immediately. Lancelot, the typical joker, now knows that he no longer works for Shylock and therefore does not need to respect or obey his master. He mocks a little bit with Shylock, and he calls also, Lancelot, calling, where are you, Jessica? He calls after Jessica in the same manner as Shylock. Shylock: who told you to call? I didn't tell you to call. Shylock scolds Lancelot. He is annoyed with Lancelot. Lancelot: your worship used to tell me I couldn't do anything without being told. In other words, that he couldn't think for himself. He only had to obey orders. Jessica enters. Jessica: did you call? What do you want? Shylock: I'm invited out to dinner, Jessica. Here are my keys. But then, why should I go? I'm not asked out of love. Their polite show is false. But still, I'll go in hate, to feed upon that prodigal Christian. Jessica, my girl, look after my house. I'm very loath to go. There is some evil brewing against my rest, because last night I dreamt of money bags. Shylock decides to accept Bassanio's invitation to dinner. Shylock hands his keys to Jessica for safekeeping. This is ironic, because we know that the thief will not come from outside, but his own daughter will be the thief. She will steal his money and his jewels. In those days, they didn't keep their money in a bank. They locked the money in their houses. And the same for Shylock. He had a room in which he kept all his wealth. And now he has handed Jessica the key. Shylock comments on Bassanio's invitation to dinner. He knows that they didn't invite him out of friendship, but more to flatter him. He also comments on a feeling of unease, and that creates a sense of foreboding. He suspects that something bad will happen in the future, although Shylock did not want to attend the dinner, and is definitely also not doing it because he wants to gain the friendship of Bassanio. He decides to go, but he'll go out of hatred. He says that he will feed upon the prodigal Christian. Prodigal means wasteful. Shylock also notes that he is loath to go, which means he is really unwilling to go. He doesn't want to go. Shylock's unwillingness to leave his house increases the tension, because we know about Jessica's plan to elope with Lorenzo. If Shylock were not to leave the house, then Jessica's plan to elope with her true love will not become a reality, because she won't be able to slip out of the house and run away. Let me just quickly focus your attention again on the first part of that line. Once again, we note in this line that Shylock asks his daughter Jessica to look after his house. And like we've already said, this is irony, because his house will be robbed of his possessions by his own daughter, the very person whom he asked to look after the house. In the second last line he says, there is some evil brewing against my rest. In other words, he's having nightmares, and there's a plot to upset his peace of mind. His dreams were of money bags. In other words, the previous night he dreamt of money bags, which was believed to be an evil omen. People in those days believed that your dreams meant the opposite of what they seemed to mean. Therefore, if Shylock dreamt about money bags, it will actually mean that he would lose his money. Shylock loves his wealth dearly, and he loves his wealth even more than his own daughter. Shylock seems a little bit superstitious, but the question remains whether he would be suspicious enough to change his plans because of the dream. If he decides not to go to the banquet, or if he leaves for the banquet but returns soon after, Jessica might be caught in the act. The fact that we as the audience already know what's going to happen to upset Shylock, in other words, we know there's truth in the dreams that he had and that his worst nightmare might actually come true. That is called dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is when the audience knows something, but the character does not. Let's continue reading. Lancelot, I beg you to go, sir. My young master is expecting your reproach. This could mean two things. One, Bassanio expects Shylock to give offense. In other words, he will expect him to refuse the invitation. And two, Bassanio expects Shylock to rebuke him. It seems as if Lancelot is urging Shylock to attend the dinner. I think Lancelot knew about Jessica's plan to elope, and he has a soft spot for Jessica. He wants Shylock to attend the dinner so that Jessica will have the opportunity to run away. In typical Lancelot style, he uses the word reproach, which actually means criticism. Lancelot meant to use the word approach. Once again, he confuses his words, and that is called, you said it, malaproposism. Shylock, so do I his. In other words, Shylock also expects Bassanio's reproach or rebuke, maybe about the terms of the bond that Antonia had to agree with, or perhaps because Shylock thinks that Bassanio might be rude to him because he is a Jew. Lancelot: and they've plotted together, I won't say to put on a mask, because everything's in such a mess it might never happen. In which case, it wasn't for nothing my nose started to bleed on Easter Monday last Christmas. That's always a bad sign. Lancelot mocks Shylock a little bit. He begins by saying they've plotted together. Plotted means they have arranged. He mentions the fact that everything is in such a mess, and that it might never happen. Remember, Bassanio's busy to prepare for his long journey to Belmont to impress Portia and win her hand in marriage. They are frantically trying to get everything ready to set sail. The dinner might not even take place. Lancelot then continues to talk a lot of nonsense, merely for the sake of hearing his own voice. He says that in which case it wasn't for nothing my nose started to bleed on Easter Monday last Christmas. That is also supposed to be a sign of bad luck. He is making fun of Shylock. Some people do feel that Easter Monday was unlucky, but Lancelot having a nosebleed and that as a sign of a bad omen is just completely ridiculous. Shylock: what? Are they masks? Listen to me, Jessica. Lock up my doors, and when you hear the drum and that vile squealing of the twisted flute, then don't climb onto the public street to gaze at Christian fools with masks and painted faces, but block my house's ears. I mean, my windows. Don't let the sound of shallow foolery enter my sober house. By Jacob's staff, I swear, I have no mind for feasting out tonight, but I will go. To Lancelot: you go first, mister. Say I will come. Shylock doesn't really pay attention to any of Lancelot's nonsense, but the one word triggers him, the word masks. Shylock does not approve of such festivities. He once again says, lock up my doors. His preoccupation with his possessions is emphasized. Everything has to be safely and securely locked away. He talks about the vile squealing, which just means it is a horrible squealing sound. Shylock doesn't enjoy any music. He then mentions the twisted flute. Players have to twist their necks when they play this type of flute, and that's why he refers to it as a twisted flute. He cautions Jessica. He says, don't climb up onto the public street. In other words, don't climb onto a chair and look through the window. So obviously the windows were quite high, and in order to look out of the windows and onto the street, you had to climb onto a chair or something else in order to gain height. So he warns her and says, don't climb up to look through the windows. To gaze at Christian fools with masks and painted faces just refers to the costumes that they will have. And then he says, but block my house's ears, and that is a form of personification because obviously houses do not have ears. He says, I mean my windows. Don't let the sound of shallow foolery enter. In other words, don't let the sound of silly nonsense enter my sober house. And then for the second time in this play, Shylock refers to Jacob. Shylock seems to admire Jacob, who had nothing but a stick when he crossed the river Jordan, although he returned as a very rich man. This shows how important money is to Shylock. Shylock refers to his house as a sober house. He regards his house as a sacred refuge, which should not be violated by anything from the evil outside world. He says, I have no mind for feasting out tonight. He does not have any desire to go out. Lancelot: I'll go on ahead, sir. Aside: Mistress, never mind all that. Look out of the window. There, a Christian will come by, who'll be worth a Jewish eye. Lancelot speaks aside, but he does not address the audience. He speaks to Jessica in such a manner that Shylock cannot hear what he is saying. Lancelot delivers Lorenzo's message to Jessica, but once again, not in private, although not so that Shylock can actually hear what he is saying. The Christian he refers to is Lorenzo. He says to Jessica, look out of the window. because Lorenzo will pass by. Shylock: what did that foolish Christian outcast say? Jessica: his words were, "Goodbye, mistress," nothing else. Note the lie. Shylock: the clown is kind enough, but a huge feeder. Snail slow to learn, and sleeps all day more than the wild cat. Idle drones don't stay in my hive, so I let him go. Yes, go, to a person I want him to help waste his borrowed ducats. Jessica: go inside. Perhaps I will return immediately. Do as I tell you. Shut doors after you. Make things fast, and fast you shall find them. A proverb, never stale, in thrifty mind. He goes. Shylock shows some unwilling kindness when he talks about Lancelot, saying, "The clown is kind enough." He also shows some unwilling kindness towards Jessica when he addresses her as "my girl." He mentions 4 different reasons why Lancelot was not worthwhile keeping as a slave. He says he eats too much, he is a lazy and slow worker, he sleeps late and snores a lot, and he wore out his uniform quickly. Shylock says he sleeps all day more than the wild cat. We all know that wild cats sleeps all day and hunts at night. He says idle drones don't stay in my hive. A drone is a male bee that does not work. Shylock uses these metaphors to show his opinion of Lancelot as an employee. In my hive refers to his home. Shylock says, I'll let him go to a person I want him to waste his borrowed ducats. He's obviously referring to Bassanio. Shylock is saying that he wants Lancelot to go and work for Bassanio and help him to waste the money that he borrowed from Shylock. His final words to Jessica was, do as I tell you, shut doors after you. Make things fast, and fast you shall find them. In other words, lock away your possessions if you want to keep them. If you lock away your possessions, when you come back, you will find them in the same place. And then he says, a proverb never stale in thriving mind. He's saying it is a wise saying which is always fresh in his careful mind. Jessica, goodbye. And if with bad luck I'm not crossed, I have a father, and you a daughter lost. Shylock has already left the house, and therefore did not hear Jessica say goodbye. She says goodbye, and if with bad luck I'm not crossed, in other words, I'm not prevented, I have a father, and you a daughter lost. I will have lost my father, and you will have lost your daughter. Jessica's decision to run away is final, but she does show some remorse. She quietly bids her father farewell. Scene 5 ends with a rhyming couplet. This gives a note of finality to the ending of the scene. Thank you for joining me for this session. I hope that you understand the explanation and that you could follow as we read. Remember to refer to the rest of the notes and ebooks and then attempt to answer the questions. If you struggle with the questions, just remember that in the question paper you will be tested on the modern day English. Some of the questions are based on the extracts on the left hand side of the page, but in the question papers and exams, your questions will only be set on the modern day version of the play. So if you do struggle a little bit, don't worry too much about it, and don't hesitate to ask. I will gladly explain it to you again. I thought I'll end off today with a joke. Why did Shakespeare enjoy high school? He didn't have to learn Shakespeare. Have a great day, guys. Bye.